sober. Hi, everybody. It is episode 483 with Lauren Sisler.
Woo!
Whoa,
483, baby. That's awesome.
isn't that awesome? Oh my gosh. I'm always
Uh,
publishing these. It's like my way of giving back to society, I feel like, because the disease of addiction hits everybody. We think it's like a certain demographic or a certain person, but it hits everybody, doesn't it?
it does. I say this all the time. Nobody is exempt from life's difficult circumstances. Nobody is exempt from addiction, falling into those addictive behaviors. We're all searching for something. We are all trying to fill ourselves up with something. And at the flip of a switch, right, we can all be pulled in a direction that can change the course of our lives forever. And I think, it all stands on, making choices, being educated, understanding, but ultimately knowing there is hope in recovery, right? And that's why you're here today. And I'm here to talk about it as well. And I'm just so thankful for this opportunity. And before we get started, I just got to say, you literally had your hair up a moment ago and you're like, I don't like it like this. And then you just shake it out and you're just like, girl, if I did that, my hair would be looking all like crazy. Like, your hair looks cute. And I'm like, dang, I'm impressed by
Dang.
that. That
Thanks
is
to my hairdresser. He does this magic. And then I try to maintain it, all throughout the time, between haircuts. Because let's face it, I'm not good
wow.
at doing my hair. I
Well,
want to
it's
tell everybody,
beautiful.
well, thank you. So Lauren is a ESPN college football reporter, which must be, is this like been a dream your whole entire life to be like into football?
Funny you say that. A dream my whole life? No. And actually, as we dig into my story, you'll know this. So I actually wanted to be a sports doctor. So sports was in the deck of cards because I was a gymnast my whole life, loved athletics, was around sports. My family's a sports family. We're all doing the dang thing, going out, doing life. And my brother was a three-sport athlete. I was a gymnast. We were on the road all the time, competing, going to competitions, all the things. And basically, I had faced challenges, right? Gymnastics is a very grueling sport, lots of
Mhm.
injuries and just a lot of just setbacks constantly, right? You're always getting forward and then you're taking 10 steps backwards, right? That's life. And so I always thought being a sports doctor would be a pretty cool gig because I wanted to help athletes get back out on the field to play. I wanted to give back in that way after I'd experienced a lot of hardships myself. So sports medicine was in the deck of cards, not sports broadcasting, but I'm sure we'll get into how we landed on this here in a moment.
Well, I'm so excited to hear your story. And I want to tell everybody the most exciting news is Lauren's book's coming out tomorrow.
I know it's finally here. I'm so excited, like literally holding my breath right now. Woo! Life is getting crazy. And I just it's all the excitement of it all. And just to be sitting here in this moment, having written a book, you might hear some pitter patter over here. My little one Mason's 14 months old, and he is just a ball of fire, just getting after it, all boy, like all the time, all the energy, just like I was when I was a kid. And I look at him as I'm about to put this book out. I look at my husband, I look at my family, I look at just people around me, my support system, and think, wow, like I did this, right? Like I did this, like this book here, like I did this. Like what? Um, which is wild and crazy to me. I never thought I would have a story that would be worthy of putting in a book, right? But here's the thing, Elizabeth, like we all have a story, right? And that's the message. We all have a story and we're all going through things. We all have chapters in our story that some are beautiful, some are gorgeous, some are just, want to wrap your arms around it. And then there's other chapters you want to literally just rip out, throw in the trash and never look back. But here's the thing, every single chapter and moment shapes who we are, right? It's the fabric of our lives. So you can't get rid of it. You can't go back in time. So why not embrace it and use it to your advantage?
I totally agree 110%. So let's start off so you grew up in Roanoke, Virginia. You were a gymnast. Tell us about your childhood. What brought you to deciding you wanted to even write a book?
Yeah, so I grew up in Roanoke, Virginia, the Star City. I know that you've been to the Star City before.
Hmm.
Um, grew up in Roanoke. Mentioned my mom and dad. We were living in the suburbs of Roanoke, and you know busy family. And that's actually where my dad's mom, I guess that's kind of where they grew up. So that's sort of just where we ended up planting ourselves. And then we moved out to the country. My parents wanted to build a dream home out in the country. So, that was the dream for them. And that ended up happening in 1997. I guess 98 is when we moved in. And we were living life. We were a family, like I said, on the go all the time, doing our thing, doing all the sports activities. And, for me, it was gymnastics all the time, huge commitment, 20 hours a week, commuting over an hour each way. And, life was good and life seemed like it was on track to what I had dreamed of, right? Which as a gymnast, look, I'm 5'9". I'm a monstrosity, probably not going to the Olympics. However, maybe a college scholarship's within reach. So that became my new goal and dream, was to earn a college scholarship. So I was after it. I was chasing after that. And I was so thankful to have the support of my family, my mom and dad, my brother Alan, just there to kind of push me through and just to keep encouraging me, even when I would have those setbacks, right? And even when I would just get down on myself and say, I don't think I can do this anymore.
I'm 5'9" too, so watch out when you said we're giants. Look at that. I'm a giant
Yes.
too. I'm
I feel
five
like a
nine.
giant. Uh-huh.
And I love that because we do, I mean, I have kids that were born in 96, 97, and 99. And it is all about your kids and wanting them to get that dream, right? It's like your parents did anything they could
Oh,
to
it
take you.
was an investment, right? Like, so, when I look back at that, right, as I'm about to hit the fourth floor, y'all, what's up? This month, October, baby, it's coming at you. Gonna be up on the fourth floor, hitting that elevator button. I'm on my way up. Um, but I think about just, my dad worked, obviously my mom worked part-time mostly because she wanted to make sure my son's, about to cruise through here. She wanted to make sure we were always taken care of, right? Like, for her, it was, she worked part-time so she could be there when we got off the bus in the afternoons, that she could take us to practice, that she could put food on the table and all those things. So she made a lot of sacrifices. And now looking back, being the mature person that I am, I'm mature most of the time. Let's be real, never fully grow up. But I look back and think, man, like that was an investment. Like, yes, I'm the one pouring out the blood, sweat, and tears in the gym, but it was an absolute family investment, right? They were committed to it financially. Gymnastics is not a cheap sport, just the amount of time and the dedication. And so when I earned that college scholarship to compete at Rutgers in gymnastics, like that was not just a me celebration. Like that was an absolute celebration for my family, for all the investment that we put in to making, my dreams a reality as a collegiate gymnast. And, and obviously it was a financial support system for us as well, right? Because, I'd actually looked at going to Air Force Academy because I wanted to go to med school, right? Wanted to be a doctor. And we thought, well, maybe that's what can help pay for the bills. And then unfortunately my SAT scores didn't quite cut it. Wasn't quite smart enough to do it, but I was going to go to prep school and I was like, you know what? No, I want to start my career. I want to start my life. Rutgers gave me an offer. I was so thankful for it. And yes, I know we were so thankful for it. And ultimately, signed that letter of intent. And here we are, doing life and doing the dream and realizing that, that's not just my dream, it's my parents' dream as well. So
Okay, I have to say, I love that you're giving your parents that credit because I was just telling someone that I find it so interesting. So, like when guys win the Super Bowl, you watch people go up like Travis Kelsey or Mahomes, and I never hear them going, and thanks, mom and dad, for all the time you spent on us. Now, maybe Travis does that on his podcast with his brother Jason, but normally most people don't come out and give the credit to the parents because it does take, I mean, we spend a lot of time, a lot of effort driving, making sure the kids are okay, right? Feeding them 3 square meals a day, doing whatever they need to get to the next level. And it is the moms and dads that that deserve a lot more credit than I see that they're getting in a lot of times.
absolutely. I mean, and it's one of those things. And I think too, you don't realize it when you're in it necessarily, right? When my mom's showing up with like the blue thermos cooler with like a hot meal in there because I was the picky eater, right? So she'd always make me these meals before gymnastics practice and make sure I was well fed. And, again, just the commitment and then even the emotional piece of it,
Mm.
right? Like going to these gymnastics meets, and I watch back these gymnastics tapes, and I say tapes because they're on VHS, y'all. And my father's screaming, he's got this loud piercing whistle. And I just remember those gymnastics competitions because we would travel all over the state of Virginia, and then of course regionals and nationals, but just hearing their voices during those recordings, right? And recognizing like the excitement and the joy, but also like the nervous anticipation, right? And when you like gymnastics is a crazy sport and it's a scary sport, right? And I just remember my mom being on the edge of her seat, like I'd mount that balance beam and just like, so like she's about to, bite her nails off kind of thing, right? But it takes maturity and it takes really kind of going through life to recognize those things. And then I also think just, where I'm at now and the journey that I've been on and the loss that I've experienced. And those things have brought gratitude and, just being grateful even for the little moments and the small connections and the relationships. They can be just as important as the big ones and the ones that stand out as maybe more significant, and I think they're all pieced together in our lives for a reason.
It's really true. And like, it's so, when we look through life, it's like, I think a lot of people think that life is like, we just get to this milestone, check. We get to this milestone, check. And if there's something really bad, oh my gosh, everything's horrible. Instead of like, this is part of my journey. And I saw you mention that in one of the podcasts you did. Like, this is a journey that we're all on. We all have these stories, and they're ups, there's downs, then there's times when it's just quiet and peaceful. And then there's another up, and then there's another down. And that's how we like, I hope I'll slide into those golden gates one day saying this was an amazing ride.
Amazing ride. Yep. I mean, it's just it really is an absolute roller coaster, right? And I think that's the ebbs and flows, and even something I've worked on with my therapist, right? I've gotten so many good insights from my therapist, and I think what's cool about it is as I've gotten older, now it's not, yes, I don't get me wrong, I sit in that chair and I sob and cry and you know feel all the feels. But I will say I've learned so many things, and just exploring why we're where we're at, why we respond to things the way we do, and how do we respond better, and how do we take situations and build that resilience, right? Because it is all about building resilience. And I think, Elizabeth, you can speak to that, right? As someone that is in sobriety, like, holy cow. I firsthand don't know addiction. I know we'll jump into my story a little bit more, but I don't firsthand know addiction. But what I do know is you are one resilient, bad mama. And
Oh
I
my
say
gosh,
that to
thank you.
anybody.
Oh,
I say that to anybody in recovery, because understanding what I know now, knowing what I know about addiction, knowing what I know about substance use disorder, knowing what I know about the fight that it takes to get up every morning and make that decision. So I don't care if you are 1 day sober, 10 days sober, 10 years sober, whatever it is. Like, I mean, I applaud you. And if you're listening now, like, I think there's such a stigma that surrounds addiction, and there's such a shame that is attached to it. And I have learned that through my personal experiences of loss, with, both my parents. And I just want people to recognize, like, you are in the fight for your life, but like, oh my gosh, what a resilient warrior you are. I think we prop up and praise people that obviously overcome other illnesses, and that's not to diminish those illnesses, but when people go through different, treatments and lifelong battles, right? We're celebrating those victories, but like, we got to celebrate these victories just the same,
oh my
because my
gosh.
gosh, I mean, you're doing amazing work, and now you're helping people find that same light and that same breath and that same purpose in what you're doing, Elizabeth. So I thank you for stepping up and having the courage to do that.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Lauren. It's been, I just had 18 years, and I have to say that it's one day at a time.
Mhm.
At times, some days it's easy and I'm coasting. Some days it's a little more challenging. Life gets lifey, right? It gets really lifey at times, especially when you have a family and a lot of people you love. So it's just a journey. This entire thing has been a journey for me. And when I started this podcast, it's called Busy Living Sober because I'm busy. That's my nickname. My brother could never pronounce Elizabeth. So
I
I'm
love that.
and I
Busy.
so
Okay.
all my good friends call me busy. So it's busy, living sober. So, and I want to change the stigma
Yep.
because even though you might not have had a drug problem yourself,
Yep.
it's a family disease. And I know that when I was in my active addiction, I didn't think I was hurting anybody else, right? Nobody else is ingesting this, just me. But in reality, everybody was being hurt by it, right? It's like shrapnel. You throw a grenade in a living room or something, shrapnel hits everybody. So everybody gets affected by this disease. And when you have it, no one's bringing a casserole to your house. I promise you that.
Yep. That's absolutely right. That's so good. Yeah. Wow. Love that.
Yeah. So it's been, I think that more people like you coming out that are actual family members is so important because Al Anon is available to a lot of people, but a lot of people don't like to go to Al Anon for some reason. I mean, I've been there as the addict, as the person that they're talking about in kind of a negative connotation. I'm always like, get me out of here. I'd rather go have a drink than be here. But, for somebody to have a book from you to go to, and so they don't have to feel alone because so many of us feel alone because of that shame, right? I don't want to tell anybody. I can't go get help. It's my family secret. I've been sworn to secrecy. If I give my parents up, I'm like the bad kid, and nobody wants to be the bad kid to their parents.
Yep.
It's really a tough disease. So, what happened in your life when you were young? So, you get into Rutgers, you move from Virginia to New Jersey. Jersey girl.
Joycey. Yes.
Jersey girl.
I know. It was definitely a culture shock. Let me tell you. Woo! I go from like the rural sticks of Virginia, right? I was in Roanoke and then I move out to the country and then I go to Rutgers. I open my mouth at Rutgers and people are like, "You're not from around here, are you?" And I'm like, "Yep, definitely not." So there's that. But with that being said, I go to Rutgers, right? I am so excited for this opportunity. I'm a collegiate gymnast. I'm living out my dream. I'm doing pre-med courses. I'm starting all the prerequisites, doing everything in line with how I, had dreamed of, right? Envisioned for that chapter of my life. And fast forward to my second semester, I'm studying for exams. I set my alarm clock, pick up the phone, call my parents. So I go to Rutgers 8 hours from home, but like not a day went by that I did not talk to my parents, right? So like a lot of you hear about these kids that are like, "Oh, I talk to my parents like once a week." Like, no, that is not me. Like I'm talking to my parents every day and they're getting a play-by-play of everything that's going on. And my mom especially, like, she was like the, just ingrained in gymnastics, knows everything about the code of points, knows everything about every skill, like just all the technical marks, everything there is to know about gymnastics. So she always wanted the play by play. Okay, how's this going? How's this skill coming along? What are you learning new? All the things. So called my mom, we talked a little gymnastics, talked a little life, and then picked up the phone, or I shouldn't say picked up the phone. She handed the phone off to my father, who was on the couch dozing off as usual. And essentially, during that conversation, we talked about school and a little more about gymnastics. And my dad had actually just celebrated his 52nd birthday. And so I remember I'd sent him this card that basically was saying, "Uh-oh, hold on one sec. Come here, buddy. See, now we got distractions, interruptions. Stand by. What's the matter? Come here." Yep. I gave him some stuff to entertain him for a while, but I guess the entertainment is no longer.
It's over. He's like, now pay attention to me, mom.
Can we finish playing over here? Hold on one sec. I'm gonna step out of the frame and just see if I can get him happy dappy do. Here we go. Okay. Then we're gonna get back to the story, friends. Here we go. Okay, I think we're good. We got a mess on the floor here. Okay, so we're back. Hey, this is mom life, right? This is what we do.
Exactly.
Woo. I actually love the fact that you like really don't edit all this stuff out, because I think sometimes we get in this mindset of like cutting all the crap out, right? But like this is real life, okay? So anyways, back to the story. Okay, so I'm at Rutgers, studying for exams, set an alarm clock, pick up the phone, call my parents, talk to them on the phone, was talking to my dad. It was his 52nd birthday. He had just celebrated, and I remember being like kind of sad, right? Like I'd been with my dad for 18 years and like gotten to celebrate his birthday. And I said, I remember saying like, I can't wait to come home and celebrate with you when we go, on break or whatever. After the school semester's out, and everything seemed normal. Hung up the phone just like we normally would, said our I love you, said our goodbyes, and I went to bed. Next thing you know, I wake up to a phone call just after 3 a.m. And of course, as I sit up and who's calling me in the middle of the night? And I go look at the caller ID on the phone and it said home. And oh, you can imagine like why are mom and dad calling me in the middle of the night? So I go like pick up the phone, I answer with hesitation, hello. And my dad on the other end basically told me that my mom had died and said, Lauren, like, I need you to get on the next plane you can, be at the airport to pick you up. And as you can imagine, an 18-year-old, like, first of all, I had like no money in my bank account, like maybe $50, and that was not going to earn me a plane ticket home. And this was back before like you could just like, it's crazy because I'll tell you, as I'm writing this book, like going through this with my co-writer, shout out to Holland Webb, for this, like he's asking me these questions and he's like, well, what about this? And what about this? And it's like, remember, this is back in 2003. Like there were no Ubers. There were no like get online and book a plane ticket. So we're calling the airline. We're on hold. It's been 30 minutes. And finally I get on there and like, I don't have enough money. And the credit card that my roommate was going to loan me to make the payment, only had like a small limit on it. It wouldn't even cover the cost of the flight. So we had to hang up and we had to get her mom to like up the limit. So it was just chaos, let me tell you. But looking back on that, I'm trying to do this, but all I wanted to do, Elizabeth, busy, was get home. I just wanted to get home, to my dad for him to tell me everything was going to be okay because he made everything okay. And, I'm frantically getting bags packed, had to get a friend of mine who had a car on campus to drive me to the airport. We get to the airport, I get on that plane and I get home and I still hadn't talked to my dad. As I mentioned, we lived out in rural Virginia. So we had a landline, no cell phones, right? So I hadn't talked to him, figured he was still taking care of things at the hospital. And then he was going to head on down to the airport to pick me up. And maybe he was just running a little behind. So my cousin and my uncle picked me up and I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to see my dad soon, right? And they don't say anything. We just hug, we cry. Obviously, everyone's sad about the news that my mom had died. So we start driving. And finally, I just work up the courage. I said, Uncle Mike, I said, where's my dad? And, you just saw the look on his face as he looks over at my cousin sitting in the passenger seat. And then he puts the car in park. And like, I literally can still see where we were on the road coming out of the airport. I can feel the gravel underneath the car as he turned around and looked at me and said, Lauren, I'm sorry, but your dad's passed away too. And it's just like, what? Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't understand. It was just this shock to the system, right? Like I still was in shock that my mom had died and didn't believe it and thought I was going to go see her. It was all a bad dream. And then I find out that my dad too passed away. And as you can imagine, as an 18-year-old just sitting there trying to process this, trying to process like, how is this life now? And it literally happens in an instant, right? And anybody that knows loss, which everybody, has experienced loss in some capacity, right? Like, it's so hard to process and it's so hard to understand why me, why now? Why did this happen? I don't, what? And I think I just kind of like sat there and just took it all in. And then it almost just became a blur, right? Going to the funeral home, doing all the figuring out how we're going to bury them with all the stuff, and then to get slapped with uh, a bill for how much it's going to be. And you're sitting here thinking like, what? Like, how am I going to afford this? So you go through these stages of grief, of shock, of just complete anger, right? And then I've got to make a decision. Am I staying home? Am I going back to Rutgers? What am I going to do? Right. And so that was just like a crossroads where I had to make that decision on what I was going to do next.
And so, oh my gosh, I'm not going to cry, but I want to cry. You're 18. I mean, had you lost anybody at that time? Grandparents or anything?
Just a grandmother. So my dad, I didn't know my dad's dad. He had passed before. But my dad's mom had passed away, and that was very significant for me. I was really close with her. And so I had experienced that loss. And then, of course, pets, and I think that's a thing too. And I want to put this out there for people because I think people are really good at kind of like doing the comparison game, like, oh, I've lost this person or I lost this thing. But it's not comparison to you. But here's the thing, loss is loss, right? So whether it is just an animal, it's not just an animal, it is an animal, something that was close to you, a loved one, a friend, whomever it may be, right? But I had experienced the loss of my grandma, but I think too in that sense, she had kind of gotten sick, and there was some preparation for it. I was maybe 10, 11 years old when that happened. And I think the hardest part was seeing also my dad, right? Like that was his mom, and seeing him walk through that and having that, vision. But outside of that, that was obviously the most significant loss. And I just, processing that, right? And there's no manual for like, how do you process grief? Like, how do you, like, you get hit with this thing. I mean, you literally get punched in the gut. And I mean, you almost like, when you get the breath knocked out of you, right? You just get knocked down, and you're just grasping like for air, like, let me breathe again. And and it's almost terrifying because you don't know when you're going to come back to the surface and actually be able to like breathe again.
I think it's crazy because especially now in the world we're living in, they're saying, how many people have died of fentanyl overdoses this year alone. And I, for better or worse, go to rooms, with other alcoholics and church basements. And I see these young people and they're processing their friends' deaths, their, family members, everything else. And, a human being's brain, especially a woman's brain, isn't evolved until she's 24, right? So how do you process something this at 18, right? Because you don't even know everything at that point in terms of your brain being fully developed. So that's a lot that you went through. And your brother Alan, how was he during all of this?
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting with that is my brother was actually stationed in the military. So I was born in Cuba. I was a military baby. My parents, my dad was in the Navy. He was stationed there when I was born. And then my brother pursued in those footsteps. He wanted to be in the military. He wanted to go in the Navy. And so he was actually stationed in Norfolk, Virginia, about three and a half, 4 hours away from home. And, he was very close with my parents, just like I was, spent a lot of weekends going home with his Navy buddies, spending time with my parents, going hunting, doing all the things out in the country. Um, and, I think for him, it's interesting because when all of that happened, you know, I I was still 18, he was 21. So in theory, he had a job, right? And so in
Yeah.
his mind, it was, hey, we collected like donations at the funeral home, the funeral service. And so instead of flowers, it was, an education fund for me. And, he had offered that up just because, he was already working. He was already putting a paycheck out there, cashing a paycheck and standing on his own 2 feet, so to speak.
Mm,
And so he, you know, in that moment, I think for him, he'd already done one deployment just after 9/11.
mm.
And actually to the day when he got home, that's when my parents had passed away a year later to the day he got home from that deployment. Well, he ended up doing two more deployments. So I think, and I hate to speak for my brother, but I do think that for him, a lot of it was, military, like I'm just going to go back. And I remember there were times where I would call my brother, and my brother's a crier and he's got emotions, but he's also like military soldier, right? And I would call him crying and upset and sad and, oh, what are we going to do without mom and dad? And he would be like, got to strap on the boots, time to strap on the boots and go to work. Right. And so his mindset was quite a bit different in that sense, right? Is like, we're just going to strap it on and we're going to go. And so, I think his mindset was just a little bit different than mine, so to speak. Um, and that I think that it took me a little longer. You think it's funny. I think it just took me a little longer to get to, that point of being okay. And then I think the biggest thing for me really through the process was the shame that I felt knowing that my parents had passed away, obviously tragically. You go back to Rutgers, like my aunt and uncle were such a big part of that, encouraging me, hey, you got to go back to school, you got to keep going in life. And they were there to really support me and help me get through it. But ultimately, you know, going through that process, right? Like, okay, now I'm back at school. Now I've got to figure out next steps in life. But, you know, people want to know what happened, right? And so now I'm having to answer this question over and over and over again to people like, well, how did your parents die? Well, I couldn't possibly tell people that my parents died of overdose. I could not possibly, come here, Mason. Hold on. We're gonna part for these messages and we'll be right back after the break. Come on. Come on. Let's go. You know, but I couldn't possibly tell people that my parents died of overdose because here's the thing. You know, you tell people that and you suddenly feel judged. You feel like you're being judged. You feel like that so like my parents' legacy in my mind was bound in my hands, right? People loved my parents and my parents were so beloved and you know, they loved hard, right? They loved people so hard and went to the ends of the earth for other people. And so I think that was the hardest part for me is like letting people in on the dark secret that like they were addicted to their medications and they were over here like taking prescription drugs and literally sticking fentanyl patches in the freezer and sucking on them. Like it's one thing to say, oh, you know, my mom and dad are taking prescription medication as prescribed. But the minute you make the choice to go off script and like to start abusing it, it was so hard for me to put that into words. And ultimately I ignored it. Honestly, I ran from because I had the perception of what I thought that meant. Oh, mom and dad were addicts. So in my mind, society told me what that was and that it was a character flaw and it was something that was wrong. It was immorally wrong and that they were bad people. And so I blocked it out of my mind, like, boom, get out of my mind. So I did all these things basically. Oh, mom and dad died. Mom died of respiratory failure. Dad died of a heart attack because that sounds so much better than overdose. Right.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, my son had a friend. They were living in DC. He was working on Capitol Hill, and his friend was an addict. And his friend would order pills to be delivered because you could go on your phone and like you can order DoorDash, you can order, you know, painkillers, and the painkillers were delivered. He had ordered tomorrow's supply to be delivered in the morning. He went down and he took it and he died. He OD'd and died. And his parents said he had an heart attack. And my son's like, Mom, why aren't they telling the truth? I don't understand because so many people might be able to learn a lesson from this death instead of saying he died of a heart attack, but because of the shame. Now, did you know your parents were addicts?
So my dad was an alcoholic. I knew that growing up, right? But as a 10-year-old, like what is an alcoholic? Other than,
Right.
oh, dad's drinking again. Him and mom are fighting about it. Mom's telling him to go back to his AA meetings. And oh, by the way, like he wakes up the next morning sober and goes back to work and life is fine for 6 months. You know, so it was kind of like that cycle and I compartmentalized it, right? Like my dad was drinking. I would just say, hey, tell my friend, let's go up to your house and play today. You know, so I did a good job of compartmentalizing. I didn't understand the magnitude of it. And so I think that's probably been a big thing for me. So I knew my dad obviously had that piece of it, but there also for me, like there wasn't a big correlation between that and the prescription drugs. Obviously there is, right? I just didn't have any clue that when my parents were going to this pain management doctor, being prescribed all these medications, that in any way they were dangerous. And I think that's the problem, right? Like I didn't know they were dangerous. I didn't know that this was something that was ultimately going to end their lives. And I think part of it was I stopped asking questions, you know, like mom and dad, because they weren't answering questions, right? Everything's fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. And so, you know, they weren't answering questions. So I figured, okay, well, you know, everything's fine. And you tell yourself that. You can convince yourself in your mind everything's fine until it's not. And I think that's what we run into, you know, we run into the issue of convincing ourselves. And I truly believe that my parents, you know, probably convinced themselves everything was going to be okay. I will say this, you know, we had a lot of financial stressors and those financial stressors were not really made known to us. They weren't super transparent about that either. My parents always, I just remember getting a phone call shortly before my parents died saying, hey, we're going to have to sell the house. We got to move. Like, we're going to go bankrupt. Like, I knew finances were in turmoil. But here's the thing, like, mom and dad were really good and they'd gotten really good at robbing Peter to pay Paul. And what I didn't know is like they were asking, my grandparents, my mom's mom and dad for money to help pay the mortgage, stroking $10 checks to keep the lights on, you know? But we're living in this, beautiful home, a modest home, but their dream home, right? And, I'd lived in a trailer for over a year prior to that as we were making the transition. So to me, like going from, a very small trailer, which I didn't appreciate at the time. And now I look back and say, I would give anything to eat Thanksgiving dinner
Yeah.
on a card table if I could have my parents back. Right. But I was a brat back then. And I was like, I want the big dining room table and all the things. Guess what? Nothing changed other than the fact it's a card table. My mom still cooked the most amazing meal. My family was there. There was love and support. We got to watch, Washington and Dallas play football. Like we were doing all the same things. It just was a different room, a different setup. And I think everyone chases, right, that like glamorous material, all the things that they're going to make them happy. But in the end, it's not about that. Right. And so I look back on those days and I think, man, if only what I had known. And I think when we were living in that trailer, that was the precursor to when the problems really started to ramp up for them. We move into this new house. And then I think the financial piece of it started to spiral out of control. And it was the perfect storm. Mom's medical issues start coming into play. She's dealing with all her, she had degenerative disc disease. So that's really what ultimately sent her to the doctor, right? That ultimately sent her to get checked out, and she had to have surgery for a neck fusion that turned into another one that then turned just the spiral. And then my dad had chronic back pain, and then he was also in the military, as I mentioned, and had the PTSD. So, this was just a long, you know, it was a progression, and it wasn't something that just happened overnight.
It's the perfect storm, but it sounds, for one, they were amazing parents. They did everything they could for you two. And that's the one thing that we think. We think that this person has to live in a shack underneath some bridge and their kids are all degenerates. And no, they're
No,
amazing parents. They were
no,
amazing parents. And did you guys have any faith growing up? That's one thing I want to ask you. Did you guys have faith?
we did. We went to church regularly, and I remember being baptized when I was younger, and it was my parents until the day that I left for college came to my bedside, and we would say our prayers, whether it was my mom, my dad, or both of them. And that was always a big part of it, right? They always would come tuck me in, and we would say our prayers, and just through faith and determination, all things are possible. Keep your eye on God, keep your eye on faith. And I think that was a big thing that helped my dad through, his struggles, right? Going back and looking at some of his medical records and seeing, when his struggles with alcohol really started to, infiltrate his life. Seeing some of the documentation from that was, he had said, like, I just don't know when to stop. And I need to be here for my mom, my family. I need to be here for my family. I need to be here for, my mom, his wife and his children. And that to me was, very eye-opening, that he had recognized that. And I think that faith did play a big part of that, right? Kind of leaning into that and, seeking out God and seeking out faith to help to, overcome the battles that he was facing day in and day out. And then obviously when my mom's health problems started ramping up and she was going through a lot of similar things and dealing with that, there was not a day that I felt that our family lost its faith. What I will tell you this, because I get this question a lot, Elizabeth, is that, how did faith play a role like after your parents passed away? I never stopped believing in God, but was I angry? Yes. Why me? Why did this happen? We're, a Christian church going family. We did everything by the book, right? Or at least we thought, but you realize there is no book. At the end of the day, there is no book. And there was the anger. So what I will say is there was a period of time where I leaned out. I didn't quit believing. I didn't quit praying, but instead of leaning into God, I leaned out. right? And I go back to my favorite poem, Footprints in the Sand, and I
Mhm.
literally
Mhm.
love that so much. When before gymnastics meets, it was always anytime I faced a challenge, it was then that I carried you. It was then that I carried you. And I think that during that time, I felt like God had just sort of dropped me on my butt and said, figure it out, you know? And while I felt his presence there, what I didn't realize is like he was carrying me the entire time. And it was a matter of me opening my eyes to it and listening and knowing like he's here, right? Like he's here. And what I tell people is, God never promises to deliver us from hardships, but he will deliver us through them. And I think that's where I've really just found my faith. And I think having a husband that is a man of faith and wants to continue to grow that, it's a big focus in our family. And it's something I'm so grateful for because we're always growing, right? And I think we all have seasons of life. There's moments where we are just all in on God and all in our faith, and then there's times that we step away. Same thing with recovery, right? Same thing with our day-to-day routine. Same thing, everything in life, could be attributed to that, right? And I just think it's important to, find yourself in those moments when you start to lean out to get yourself positioned that you can lean back in.
Well, I love I love that. I say the biggest gift I ever gave my kids was a relationship with God, to know that they aren't alone. And the crazy thing with addiction is like if somebody has cancer, right? You know that they've been in stage 1, now they're in stage 4, or they're in, they've I can't even think of the word. It's benign now. It's not even. It's They've found that the treatments worked, and they've gone into, what do they call it?
Remission.
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 I
Yeah.
just had a brain. Give me 50. I'm 55. My brain stops working at times, but they're in remission and then it comes back. But that's the same thing with addiction, right? You're going to have times that you're like on top of it, and then times when you're going through a really hard time and you can't call your doctor because of that shame, which is what drives me insane. Because when you're in the hardest parts, it's so hard to say, help. Help, I need help, because we're supposed to be strong here. And especially your father being a military man and your mom being, I've got it all together. I can't call anybody and tell them I need help. And that's the part that I want to change. Like if you need help, it doesn't matter where you are and how many times you've tripped, how many times you've relapsed, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't
Keep
matter.
coming. Keep
Keep
coming.
coming. One first
Keep
chance,
coming.
there's a multitude of chances. And I think that's what, I want to encourage people because I think that's where, we get in this mindset that like, well, I messed this up again, right? There's just no hope for me. And, I think you see it a lot even in prison reform. And you see it where people, obviously end up having to serve time. And, a lot of drug related issues or a lot of incarcerations are related to drug use, right? And addiction. And that's all a piece of it. And I think that, there is such a shame and stigma that is tied to it, but there doesn't have to be, right? And I think that's what I want to encourage people, no matter how low you've gotten, how far into the depths of hell you've walked, you can rise again and ultimately come back stronger and more resilient, and you can use that to your advantage, right? You can use that to your benefit. And buddy, I know. And I think that that's where, we have to understand that this is not there's no timeline. This is not this is going to fix it tomorrow. We live in a world of instant gratification with social media and all the things, get the likes, get the clicks, all the things. I want this now. But that's not reality. And we've got to be willing to put in the work. It's going to take work. It's not going to happen like that. Go through the process and also look around you and say, yes, like I see that they did it. I take hope and encouragement from that. But don't compare yourself to everyone else and say, man, like this person did it this way. Well, I missed the mark there. I guess we might as well. You want to stand up? There you go. There you go. We got little man just getting
I
after it today.
I love it. I love it. I think he's at his time. He's like, Mom, enough. I want you to go play with me. So I want to end with this. I have to tell you, I have a herniated disc in my back, and I went to the doctor, and it's a pain doctor. And I had to give a urine sample before I went and saw the doctor. I'm like, what do you need this for? I've been sober for this long. I'm definitely not pregnant. And they're like, well, we do this for everybody. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Because they want to make sure what they're giving somebody. We want to make sure if we've already
Yes.
given you opiates, well, how much do you have in your system right now? And I love that they're doing this right now. And I actually had my doctor on a couple of weeks ago to talk about what's going on in pain and pain medicine and how they're now sprinkling fentanyl all over the place. Mason's having
Yeah.
fun with this Chick-fil-A French fry container. I love it. It is, I don't want anybody to die in vain. And this disease is so cunning, baffling, and powerful. And, I don't want anybody ever to ever give up. Don't ever give up and keep
No,
reaching out for help.
no,
And you are so
never,
strong. And I
ever.
love that your courage to go out there and tell your story. And it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm so excited to see everybody have your book. So you guys, it comes out Shatterproof tomorrow. Go to the Amazon. You'll be able to go on the description, everybody, and it's going to be right there. It's going to say click and you can buy it and put it right into your
Woo!
basket at
Right
Amazon.
into your basket. Yes, I know. And I'm so excited. I'm just so thankful for the support. I mean, having the support, and I got to tell you one thing as I've got Mason sitting here, 14 months old. When I was writing the book, at the back of the book, I actually wrote a letter to him. And this was when he was an infant and he was literally laying on my chest. And just thinking, about the fact that he never will get to meet his grandparents. He will never get to meet my mom and dad. It breaks my heart, but I also hope that, the light that I'm able to continue to shine on their lives and their legacy and the work that we're hoping to keep accomplishing and impacting other people's lives, through sharing their story. I just want him to know, that life is not going to be easy. Life is going to be challenging. And I want him to always know that he can come to me and that he can lean on his mom, and that when things get rocky and get challenging, that I'm going to be here to help him, right? And I can't fix everything and I can't bail him out of everything, but when you have that support system, because my parents were that for me. They were such a significant support system for me. And I would say this, as I'm about to turn 40 years old, I wouldn't be where I am today if they hadn't have laid that groundwork for 18 years of my life. And I think that's what the beautiful thing is. And so I want to encourage all of you out there that are trying to make an impact, whether it's with a child, whether it's with somebody that's important in your life. I feel like we have to give all the choice. You want to try this? Does this look fun? Yeah. I just want to encourage people to know, like, you're laying the groundwork, and you don't have to be perfect in it, right? You don't have to be the perfect parent or the perfect sibling or the perfect, coworker. There's going to be challenges. You're going to go through things, but just know, being intentional with that time. And even if it's for 5 minutes, having those conversations, laying the groundwork for impact that can build that resilience and help people through the next chapter of their life when challenges do come. And, I'm so thankful for this, and, just the opportunity to present this book to people, and that shatterproof mindset, right? It's leaning in and attacking adversity, right? It's developing that mindset that bend, don't break. Because at the end of the day, like, in essence, my life when my parents died was like someone took a baseball bat and tried to shatter my life into a million pieces. And, you know, recognizing that you are going to face challenges, you are going to go through so many things that are going to make you feel like giving up. But at the end of the day, like, you're here, you're on this earth. It's a gift. It's a blessing. Take the good and the bad, use it to your advantage, build that resilience. And ultimately, I tell people this: fall in love with your story. Fall in love with your story, because I believe truly that if you learn to fall in love with your story, that you can find meaning and purpose in every single chapter, and find the joy again, and find the hope and the challenges.
I love it. I love it. Well, I believe that Mason will see his grandparents again. It'll probably be in heaven. I know it. I know it. I know it. You're an amazing woman. I'm so blessed to have met you. I can't wait. I hope to see you again. If you're ever at a game here in South Florida, we got to go to, Hard Rock Stadium, give me a call. I'll come down and meet you.
Yes. Okay. So you're in South Florida. Is that what you said?
I'm in South Florida. I'm
Okay.
between Palm Beach and Miami.
Oh, buddy. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
he's like, I'm done, Mom. It's been such a pleasure. You guys, thank you so much. Also, you can go check out Lauren every Saturday. Or every Saturday you're on a football field somewhere in the United States showing us a football game. And you guys, I'm so again grateful that you guys were here to listen. Please share this with your friends. If you like what
Yes.
you heard, please subscribe to my channel and go out and buy Lauren's book. It's going to be, again, you can find her link
Hey,
in the bio.
embrace the chaos, right?
Exactly.
Embrace the chaos. Here we go. Here we go. Life is chaotic. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Thank you for being busy. Thank you for everything. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for your love and support. And if you guys have questions, follow me on social media at Lauren Sisler. I'm happy to connect with you. Tell me your story. My DMs are open, so hit me up. And thank you again for this opportunity. And we'll see you on the other side.
Thank you again, Lauren. And again, you guys, you'll have all of our social links in my description as well. And until next time, everybody, keep getting busy, living